When I set out to make Anime Abandon, I promised myself that I wouldn't let a set structure dictate how an episode was to be made. Each episode would be guided by the nature of the subject. Sometimes it would be a plot point by plot point review, and sometimes it would be an overarching plot synopsis. It depends entirely on what I'm reviewing. That is why I feel a little hesitant with today's subject, Perfect Blue.
Some of you might be taking this to mean that I'm about to launch into my patently hilarious style of reviewing where I shit on a well-loved classic and damn the consequences and fans. But please, halt your angry typing for a few moments. I don't hate Perfect Blue, and I certainly don't hate Satoshi Kon.
I liked Paranoia Agent, and Magnetic Rose is one of my favorite works of fiction ever. But we're not talking about either of those films, or Kon specifically for that matter. We're talking about Perfect Blue, and whether or not it can stand on its own.
Whenever you're discussing in depth about the works of a recently deceased artist, in this case director Satoshi Kon, who passed away August 24th, 2010 of pancreatic cancer, you wind up walking a very fine line between a careful examination of their legacy and insulting the dead. So please bear this in mind when I say that Perfect Blue is a shade under from being mediocre.
Huh. I thought for sure that would cause a chorus of...
I know, I've heard it all before, but I just can't bring myself to actually like Perfect Blue. I know I'm gonna have to explain myself, and I will, but just know up front that I'm not going to be singing too many praises.
So, why don't I like Perfect Blue? Well, let's recap. Spoilers, by the way.
Mima is a pop idol.
But we should be selling Mima as a pop idol.
Mom, the pop idol image is suffocating me.
Ah, she's a pop idol, understand?
Oh yeah, that's right. You're no longer a pop idol.
Thank you for making that clear.
Mima, tired of the life of a pop idol, decides on a career move as an actress, against the wishes of her manager, Rumi. She winds up getting a part in a sleazy direct-to-video series where she plays a rape victim turned murderer. However, art starts to eerily imitate life as Mima's life takes a harrowing turn. Crazed stalkers leaving threatening messages and posting creepily detailed accounts of Mima's life online, as well as the real-life murders of people around her, start to blur the line between paranoia and reality.
Ah! Mima, what's wrong with you? Oh my god, you're bleeding.
This blood. Rumi, is it real?
Mima.
This was Satoshi Kon's first feature as a director, but even here you can plainly notice the themes of which his work recited: the nature of blurred reality, Japanese society and popular culture, and the examination of performing arts.
That last bit I rarely see talked about. A good number of Satoshi Kon's work deals with both actors and singers and the reality they wrap around themselves. Magnetic Rose, Millennium Actress, and Perfect Blue all deal with this sort of dual reality that performers routinely live by. And this is where Perfect Blue starts to stumble.
A good chunk of the film is devoted to Mima struggling to separate herself from the character she plays in the series. During the latter half of the second act, Mima continually shifts from on-set to her real life, unaware if she's Mima or her character. In theory, this simulates the confusion and paranoia that Mima is going through.
You are... Can you tell me what your name is?
My name? I'm Mima Kirigoi.
Okay, and what do you do?
Idol? No. Now I'm an actress.
That must be really hard work.
Yeah, it's really hard, but it's what I've chosen to do.
Amazing. She thinks she's some new, young, up-and-coming actress named Mima Kirigoi.
But in practice, this eschewed sense of narrative pace makes the film feel like it's spinning its wheels in mud. By the third or fourth time Mima awakes to what she thinks is the real world, the strain on the audience's patience dwindles. At points, it can get downright tedious watching Mima struggle through her delusions.
Admittedly, it's not as repetitive as, say, Endless 8, but honestly ask yourself, how many times do we need to see Mima wake up in her apartment in a sudden and jarring scene shift before we figure that the film is wasting our time?
I think this problem is the result of Perfect Blue being an adaptation of a novel instead from an original screenplay. Perfect Blue was the only film that Satoshi Kon directed but didn't write. and I think Cohn's fascination of blurred realities was sort of crowbarred into the already established story. This makes for a film that's hard to be involved with. You can't let the plot envelop you without being jerked out of the story by the film telling us that the previous scene didn't matter and was only a delusion of Mima's.
On my Twitter account, I asked my followers how they would describe the film, and a good number of them described it as a murder mystery with interesting visuals. And that is probably the most apt way to describe Perfect Blue. But that opens up a whole new set of problems. As a murder mystery, it doesn't make sense.
Considering this is Cohn we're talking about, not making sense would be a given, but I'm not talking about making sense in general terms. I'm talking about in terms of both narrative and character consistency. At the end of the film, it's revealed that Mima is not the only one who has succumbed to delusion, as Rumi, her manager, has also deluded herself into thinking she's the real Mima, and not only has committed all the murders until now, but also sent the stalker Mimanya after Mima.
But, Rumi, why are you...
Why is Rumi? Oh, it's okay. Rumi went home. She said she worked hard and needed to get some sleep.
Don't talk like that! This is a joke, isn't it, Rumi?
Your heart goes thump, 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 thump when you're in love, but then it pays off when you're loved back. What do you think? Perfect, huh? After all, I am a pop idol, and a pop idol has to sing.
The French have a term for something like this, and I know the French have a term for everything. If you'll excuse my boorish American accent, the term is voler à deux, which roughly translates to madness shared by two. It's not very commonly used in fiction because it has the tendency to open a slew of plot holes if it's revealed that another character, whom up until the end we were led to believe had both feet planted firmly on the ground.
If Rumi is so far gone that she honestly believes that she's Mima the pop idol, then how come she looks like she has it together for most of the film?
There are occasional hints of her obsession with Mima as a pop singer, like when she storms out of the set during the filming of Mima's rape scene, but that is a pretty large leap in logic for the audience to accept. From a twist ending standpoint, I get why they didn't make it obvious that she's unhinged, but this is a complete character 180. Not only that, this also opens an avalanche of questions of how Rumi was able to contact Mimanya and push him to send Mima messages and to try and kill her. Dumb luck can only explain so much is all I'm saying.
But worst of all is how this ending winds up diminishing what Mima has gone through.
Mima is, by all intents and purposes, mentally broken. She hallucinates, loses track of days on end, she's hysterical and is prone to hurting herself. But after surviving Rumi attacking her, it's implied that Mima is over her psychosis, and the film ends on a happy note?
Once in a while, she returns to her Rumi personality.
I know I'll never see her ever again. But thanks to her, I am who I am today. No, I'm the real thing.
Weren't you pissing your pants last week because you saw yourself dancing on street lamps? Who thought for one moment that a story about a woman who is so far out of it that she's to the point of hallucinating would end on a high note?
That isn't to say that the story had to have a tragic ending, or even a bittersweet ending. If the story just hinted that there's hope for her at the end of all of this, then that would have been fine, but this just removes all doubt and ambiguity and just makes everything she went through have that much less impact.
I think what seals it, though, is that terrible Full House sounding song that plays us out immediately as the credits roll, like we just sat through a very special episode on ABC.
I mean, to say nothing of the implausibility of someone recovering that quickly from mental illness that grave, the real question we should be asking is, what was the point? What did Mima go through that made her a better person? And how? She says that she knows who she is, but how did nearly getting killed by her psychotic manager instill a sense of self-identity, with seemingly no help from any psychiatric professional? Again, this is where I feel that the source material wasn't very conducive to Cohn's style of storytelling. From the erratic character turns, the repetitive structure of the narrative, and the horrible ending, it honestly does feel like this is Cohn's first film. But with all of that said, there are merits to Perfect Blue that I truly do like. As I mentioned earlier, Cohn often explores themes of Japanese society, and while it's not the main focus of Perfect Blue, the times when the film breaks away from the murder plot and Mima's crumbling psyche are actually some of its better moments. The struggle of Mima trying to remain relevant to a flippant public, the obsessional drive of fans that blows past the limits of acceptability, and most telling of all, the business of objectifying women. These parts are kind of hard to talk about because I can't show you what happens, but there are scenes where Mima's coerced into taking risque photo shoots and the previously mentioned rape scene. But unlike most anime I've talked about until now, these scenes weren't meant to exploit, but rather to illustrate what culture has devolved to, and how people degrade themselves for it all.
Of course I don't want to do it, but I didn't want to tell them that all those people have done so much for me.
See, didn't I tell you? Is that really the job that you wanted? It's a pin.
Both these scenes, the photo shoot and the simulated rape, are very hard to sit through, as they should be, and at no time does the film glamorize what is happening, which is all helped immensely by the uncomfortable and unfamiliar atmosphere that permeates the entire film. The soundtrack is off-kilter and minimalist, and scenes play out with the bare minimum of dialogue, allowing the viewer to take in the imagery and sound, so every scene of violence and brutality hits harder and with that much more purpose.
But, unfortunately, all of the atmosphere that the film builds up deflates like a popped balloon when that ending comes around and just shits on everything.
For me, Perfect Blue is a frustrating sit. There is the makings of a truly great film here, and at times the mood and visuals reach the heights that the film obviously strives for, but the story and narrative can't keep up with it, and just drags the entire experience down.
Some of you may have been wondering if I was going to bring up Black Swan and the similarities between the two films. Well, this is an anime show, and talking about an American film that may, or may not, have taken influence is secondary to the show's purpose. But I will say this.
I think I liked Black Swan better, if only because it keeps its tone and focus intact. The ending fit the story, the characters remained consistent, and the nature of the main character's psychosis was handled with much more maturity than in Perfect Blue. It doesn't have the breadth or range of focus that Perfect Blue had, but it had a selective focus, which gave it a nice and taut feeling and pace. Oh, and Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis making out doesn't hurt either.
I can say with all honesty that Perfect Blue is my least favorite of Satoshi Kon's films. But with that said, I can at least appreciate the effort. Confession time, by the way. I did this episode not just because I had something to say about Perfect Blue, but because I wanted a buffer for my next episode. I don't blame you if you don't want to join me, because it's going to be rough. Till next time.